With us to review this morning's newspapers, journalist, Middle East expert Nabila Ramdani and the broadcaster Henry Kelly. Morning to you both.
Morning
again.
Morning again.
Not gone shopping.
No.
Are you going later?
No.
Later, yes.
No. You are.
Nabila, the Express this morning blames city bankers as much as rioters. These are political messages from religious leaders.
Yes, and I think there was some people were. Some papers were amazed that church leaders should, take on political issues and talk about political issues. I don't think, that is something particularly new, or that is something that church leaders, religious leaders, shouldn't be doing. I think it's very much the role of church leaders to address socio-economic and indeed political issues. Of course, the number one priority is to deal with people's souls and look after them in eternity. But going to church, for example, is also very much part and parcel of a day-to-day praxis for worshippers. And in that respect, we've seen how the church got involved in the St. Paul's protest, for example, and the church was in fact split over that issue.
But historically, and still to this day, the church and state in this country are uniquely intertwined, because the head of state is the head of the church. Her Majesty the Queen is Fidei Defensor. So it's a blurred line. But I think it's a bit naive of the Archbishop of Canterbury to say that city bankers, as much as rioters, are to be blamed for the ills of society. Yes. I think that's very naive.
I found the speech a bit muddled as well.
Yeah, exactly. What would happen if some clergyman in France attacked, say, Sarkozy or the political system?
Well, it did happen on very rare occasions. For example, when Sarkozy government took the decision to deport gypsies, then church leaders were very outspoken. But that was unusual in the context of a secular country.
Because you keep the Roman collar at arm's length in France, very much so.
Henry, a New Times today. We've been hearing about David Cameron's poll rating this morning, which is very good, and people are surmising that is because of his stance on Europe. And it looks like the coalition might be going further to stamp their feet in terms of European legislation.
The Times suggests that the coalition is in a drive to reform European human rights court, but they wouldn't be alone in that. Switzerland and a few other countries have been raising their eyebrows and making a fuss about it for many years. For example, ministers say that it's interfering too much in domestic policy and ignoring the will of national parliaments.
I guess the big latest one was the vote for prisoners, wasn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And the whole point about it is, you see, people would blame the European Union, but it's not the European Union that's at fault. It's the European Convention on Human Rights, which really was started in 1959. So it's nothing to do with the contemporary European Union. So it's different targets that have been sort of merged. You were talking about, muddled and confused. The whole issue is confused, because every time anything happens here that comes from or appears to come from Brussels, everybody shrugs their shoulders and says, there you go, Europe again. And very often it's not.
Stay with us, Henry, Nabila. Some of the stories we'll be talking about next will be performing to a different sort of crowd. The Pakistani sportsman who swapped his cricket pads for politics. You know who that is, don't you? And breaking the £1 billion barrier. It's been a big year for the big screen. Continuing with our newspaper review this morning in the company of the journalist and Middle East expert Nabila Ramdani, broadcaster Henry Kelly. Hello again to you both. Where are we going now, Henry?
Yeah, and Nabila has spotted this one.
Back to Europe, in fact, European politics, where the Daily Mail is covering a story about ministers will defy meddling EU over votes for prisoners. So basically the story is that ministers are preparing to defy Europe over its insistence that Britain gives prisoners the right to vote. And I think that's a very crucial issue. And the Foreign Office has drawn a blueprint to reform the European Court of Human Rights with the aim of winning back power for national governments. So again, it's,
that's what we were saying at the previous report.
Because it's almost a year ago, isn't it, that ministers voted to say no, they couldn't. I mean, it was an overwhelming majority, wasn't it? The prisoners couldn't have a vote, so it's another example of of EU.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to, well, I'm staying with the Daily Mail, in fact, because we're going to talk about betting.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
This is quite shocking, this article, isn't it?
I really don't know what to make of this. According to the Mail, children are twice as likely to have a betting problem. The charity GAM Care, that's Gambling Care, estimates that around 60,000 children aged between 12 and 15 are addicted to gambling.
What sort of gambling?
Well, it's all sorts. Over 16, there's 500,000 with a gambling addiction. And the figures suggest that gambling could become an even bigger issue in the future. Many children, this for all of us who have children, though mine are certainly past this, get hooked on gambling by spending their pocket money on fruit machines in service stations and amusement arcades.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting... it says that many of the young people say their first step towards gambling, their first addiction was fruit machines, and we were just sort of talking in the break about the fact that a lot of us experience them on your local pier and things. But it is, I noticed going through the motorway services, if you're ever stopping with small children, they're all brightly lit up, and if you've got small children, they just desperately want to go in and look at the bright lights. And
if you get that, though, Lorna, the next stop when you're 16 or 17, when your parents are not leaning over your shoulder on the computer every day, is going in to the internet, going online and doing online gambling.
It's very easy and accessible these days.
It's so easy. I mean, needless to say.
Doesn't seem to really give a reason for why it has increased so much, though. Maybe it's accessibility, I guess.
It's accessibility, almost certainly accessibility.
Yeah.
Nabila, the Times this morning, cheers from the crowd as the cricket hero returns. And he's on the attack as well, isn't he, Imran Khan?
Yes, well, not only he's still extremely good looking,
isn't he?
Steady on.
But he's also a serious political force, apparently, in his own country, Pakistan, where he attracted a crowd of 150,000 people yesterday at a rally. And it's also astonishing because it's outside, he was in Karachi, which is outside his political heartland in Punjab. So his political base is growing and growing, and his basic political message is a mix of, according to what the paper says, self-reliance, anti-Americanism, particularly an anti-drone campaign, anti-corruption. He's determined to sweep away the corrupt establishment in Pakistan, and redistribution. And his political party, Movement for Justice, is doing particularly well and is compared to a tsunami sweeping away the corruption in Pakistan. So, I mean, good luck to him. He's
he's certainly very charismatic. And you hear people saying, oh, politics should not be about personalities, it's about policy. Well, politics is essentially at heart. You look at a guy or a woman, you think, they make sense.
Yep. Yes. And hence the poll this morning about David Cameron.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, the poor old Greeks would never have got back from Persia if Xenophon hadn't been the type of bloke who said, listen, follow me, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Henry, is a really interesting story, a historical story in the Daily Telegraph today about the Argentine conflict with the Falklands,
which is, of course, decades ago. Well, a top secret book which has had access to top secret papers proves that the warship Belgrano was heading into the Falklands exclusion zone when it was sunk in 1982 and not heading back to port as the Argentinians had claimed. Now, as you said there, this has been going on and on and on. And of course, it led to the famous confrontation on television between the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher then and a viewer who was on a phone-in on BBC television. Now, the details will be in this book, but it's called The Silent Listener, and it's by a man called Major David Thorpe, and he has spent the last 34 years trawling through military intelligence and military signals because he was a signal officer himself. So there isn't time now to go into the details of it, but it's going to be a very, very interesting story on not just the national level and between us and the Argentinians, but a world level, because it proves that the Brits, the bad old Brits were telling the truth.
Nabila, very quickly tell us why boarding schools appear to be back in vogue.
Well, they are being seen as a stepping stone to university, and parents are increasingly sending their children to boarding schools to acclimatise them to the university environment. So you've seen an awful lot of 16 and 18-year-olds now being sent to boarding schools to just get used to the environment and being used to living on their own as well. And I found that story fascinating, because in France we don't have a tradition of boarding school, and we don't even leave home to go to university.
It's extraordinary, that, isn't it?
Very different, very different.
Very different, yeah.
Interesting chat this morning. Nabila, thank you very much. Henry, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.
This morning.